Welcome back to International Finance. I am Andy Kim, your Dr. Finance. And then we've been going through chapter 4 of Eun, Resnick, and Chulun, which is about corporate governance all around the world. Governance, I told you, is about how can I get my money back as an investor, right? Either stock investors or bond investors or whatever form of investors you may be, okay? You don't want to lose money. And then there is a principal agent conflict, okay? Especially it's like corporations, big corporations, millions of shareholders hold the ownership of it, but I cannot control it because I don't have expertise. Like semiconductor industry, I don't have expertise over there. Let the Samsung CEOs take care of it. But the trouble is I cannot monitor him 100%, and then we cannot make a complete contract with him. Okay, every nitty-gritty detail of what he does or what she does in each time, we cannot contract that. Okay, and the monitoring capability, no way. Even though you say, Chinese AI system is so super that you have a CCTV everywhere, you cannot CCTV monitor your CEOs too much, right? You cannot direct him or her to do this or that. Even if you could monitor him or her, you don't have expertise. He has better knowledge or she has better knowledge. And then she can determine whatever they want, right? So that you contract with, incomplete, right? Contracting, okay? Incomplete contracting has to be there. And then you incentivize, right? Give economic incentives like stock ownership or stock or options so that by, working hard, the CEO can maximize his or her utility, and the shareholders will be happy as well because the market is efficient, so that the fact that or the information that the CEO is working hard and doing smart decisions gets priced in your stock price. So both parties getting happy thanks to market efficiency. Okay. Anyway, and then the legal protection of the shareholders seem to matter, and then as it turns out, the legal origins seem to matter, right? Where does your country, come from, right? Was it, under, British Empire versus German Empire and then things like that, Japanese rules, right? That legal system has a long-lasting legacy in that society, even after Second World War, right? Just recreates itself in their own way, right? Goes on. The thing is, Anglo-American systems seem to be caring more about the investor protection, okay? And then that kind of investor protection seem to matter for seem to affect the cross-sectional variation in ownership concentration. Different countries in different countries, companies seem to have different degrees of ownership concentration or the complicatedness in the ownership structures. The control rights, okay, seem to vary depending on the legal protection. That's the story over here. The companies domiciled in countries with weak investor protection may need to have concentrated ownership as a substitute for legal protection. This is not without cost. In companies with concentrated ownership, large shareholders can abuse smaller shareholders. Oops, that's South Korean situation. And that's primarily why we have a Korea discount, right? Korea discount, because those founding families, right? They wield excessive power, okay? So that these, at the expense of small shareholders, they do whatever they want, right? Mergers and acquisitions simply to transfer their wealth to their sons and daughters, right? At the expense of the smaller shareholders, right? And in the first place, this society is more conformative, and nobody will say against the big shareholders. So what, let's do it. They do it. Capital markets and valuation, investor protection promotes the development of external capital markets. When investors are assured of receiving fair returns on their funds, they will be willing to pay more for securities. An external market, internal capital market, what's the distinction here? The external versus internal, it matters. It depends on the definition of the corporations. What is the definition of the corporation? what is a corporation? That kind of fundamental questions. How many times did you ask yourself, right? The thing is, in American, Anglo-American system, they thought about this kind of definitional question, fundamental question, like 100 years ago already, 1935 or something, Berlin means. They had a paper about this, what is corporation? And then Coase, Ronald Coase, okay? All these guys, right? Big guys were trying to get the answer. And then they said, corporations are the nexus of contract, okay? Corporations are nexus of contract. The company, right? Nowadays, the concept is quite clear. Previously, like 10 years ago, the people would have said, companies, well, you can see that building Samsung over there. That's Samsung's boundary over there. Nah, the factory and then the factories and hardware and then the building itself, is that the boundary of that corporation? And the answer is, no, not really. Not really. These days, after COVID-19, the kind of concept gets clearer because you work, your father works at home, okay? Home office, thanks to the Zoom, and then all this kind of distant, right, communication tools, right? So the boundary of corporation is not the physical boundary, but about the contract that really works, right? The employment contract that really works. And then not only employment contract, but the supplier relationship, all these kind of things really seem to matter in defining the boundary of corporation, excuse me. By the way, so external capital markets means usual stock market or a bond market or anything, outside your corporate boundary, corporate contract, like bank lending market. All these things are external capital market. Internal capital market means what? Within your companies, right? Or organizations within, right? Internally. There is a capital market. This is hard to grasp as undergraduate students. But the thing is, if you start to work for Naver, right? Naver, they have all different divisions and subsidiaries, right? So Webtoon business is there, Naver, and then web search function is there, one division, and then Naver Finance is also there, all different divisions. And in the end, before the IPOs or spinning off, right? In the primitive form, they will be in the form of divisions within a company, right? Division by divisions. And then your 부장님, your bosses, right? You belong to Naver Webtoon. By the way, one of our GBA students work for Naver Webtoon. And then that division, right? Where your bosses of boss, right? Boss of bosses, right? The 부장님, right? Department manager will be fighting for the budget in the internal capital market. Other division managers, right? The resource, the money to invest is limited. Okay, limited resource, scarce resource. We fight for that budget, and then who gets allocated, who gets the money, okay, is a big issue. Internal politics takes place, and where you belong to seem to matter a lot over there. Right, how to survive within that organization. Yeah, that's a big issue, okay? But I hope you guys succeed and survive in that internal struggles. Life is endless chain of struggles like that, right? It's fun actually if you start to enjoy it. Anyway, so internal capital market, external capital market. So the question is, where internal capital market versus external capital market, where will you look for when you need money? Okay, if the legal protection of the country is good enough, strong like Anglo-American system, then you have more reason to go to external capital market and get money to fund your projects, okay? If the outside external capital market is bad in terms of legal protection, you will you will depend much more on the internal capital market. I don't trust them, okay? They will screw me. So within this organization, I want to snatch up more of the capital, internal capital market, right? That's the idea here. When investors are assured of receiving fair returns on their funds, they will be willing to pay more for securities in the external capital market. Thus, strong investor protection will be conducive to large capital markets. Weak investor protections can be a factor in sharp market declines during a financial crisis. So this kind of investor protection seemed to have some impact on your country's economic growth, actually. If you read Ross Levine's articles, right? He's a big shot, big guy in UC Berkeley finance department. He used to be my professor in Minnesota, back in Minnesota. And then, he has a series of paper about this. The existence of well-developed financial markets promoted by strong investor protection may stimulate economic growth by making funds readily available for investment at low cost. And several studies document this. And then financial development can contribute to economic growth in three ways. One, it enhances the efficiency of investment allocation. Two, it channels savings toward real investments in productive capacities. And three, it enhances savings. So that's that. And then we move down to ownership structure. And then especially developing countries or less developed countries, their ownership structure of the corporation seem to be very complicated, right? Is the issue. Exhibit 4.6 illustrates the pyramidal ownership structure for Daimler-Benz, a German company, at the beginning of 1990s. The company has three major block holders, which is Deutsche Bank, Mercedes Automobile Holding, and the Kuwait government, right? And the remaining percent of shares are widely held. And then the pyramidal ownership structure illustrated it makes it possible for large investors to acquire significant control rights with relatively small investments. For example, the Robert Bosch controls 25% of Stella Automobile, which in turn owns 25% of Mercedes Automobile Holding, which controls 25% of Daimler-Benz. So Robert Bosch can possibly control up to 25% of the voting rights of Daimler-Benz AG with only 1.56% cash flow rights in the company. So the control rights versus cash flow rights matters there. Cash flow rights is about dividend claim, right? Claim to the dividend. You get the dividend payment as much as the essential ownership that you get, okay, in that company, 1.56%. But control rights, right? Control rights, you can wield more power than that because your ownership, indirect ownership, okay, matters, right? Now, the ownership of Daimler-Benz, right? The son company, I would say, right? Son, daughter, whichever it may be, right? It is held by other, Deutsche Bank, right? And then Mercedes Holdings and Kuwait government, other atomistic millions of shareholders like you and me. Yeah, the ownership structure. The diagram is shown the upside down. The typical pyramidal ownership, we say it, right? In traditional displaying or is like son company, the parent company, son, parent company, and then grandpa company, right? And then they have others, and then you can other sons and daughters and things like that, right? They show it this way. As 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 30 different, right? That's pyramidal ownership. They would typically describe in other textbook. But here it is interesting because this son company is shown over here. And then who is their owners, right? And then the owners, who are their owners? And then subsequently they trace back who is the ultimate owner, things like that, okay? And the Deutsche Bank, right? And then this has to do with, the ownership structure tells a lot about the history of the corporations because the German economic development was more central government directed, kind of, encouraged, right? Through the banking system. It's more bank-based system through Deutsche Bank. And then Bayerische Landesbank, and then Dresdner Bank, and then Commerzbank, and things like that. and all this kind of bank holding structure is there for different corporations, and they also have their parent companies ownership structures like this. Anyway, so you see this complicated structure. The thing is, the guy over here, right? Guy over here or there, where is Bosch, right? Bosch, Mr. Bosch, they can wield, right? They can wield a lot of power, more power than their what they can get as a dividend from this Sun company. Okay, 1.5% of dividend, they can get it, but their essential power, okay, is much more than that because they have indirect ownership for other guys. And this kind of structure is quite familiar, okay, for Korean students, right? For US students, this may be complicated. Oh my God, that's so complicated. But for Koreans, like, come on, that's child's play, right? Why? We have even more than that. We're going to see this later. Daimler-Benz, by the way, getting back to this one. The ownership structure, right, it seems like it's like this. You see it. And then all different parties have significant ownerships. And then you see essentially the key point is the cash flow right is so small, but the ownership right, right? Cash flow right versus voting right. Voting right is much bigger because of the indirect ownership. That's the key message here. Yeah, and then Bosch can control up to 25% of the voting rights of Daimler-Benz with only securing the corporation of 3 other firms, at least 2 of the 3, things like that. Okay, not bad for only directly controlling 1.56% of the company, but it's it makes us difficult to understand the corporations in their decision-making structure. Okay, when it comes to complicated ownership, you are in the right country, right? Samsung is here, and Samsung is just one of the many corporations that do this kind of complicated ownership. Pyramidal structure, that's a child's play, I told you, right? Semiconductor circuit ownership, I would say. Circuit ownership. Or cobweb, right? Cobweb. You see Samsung Electronics, their key business is what? Chip making, the semiconductor DDR, right? Dynamic random access memory chip. That's their cash cow business. And the thing is, their ownership structure is really, really complicated. The thing is, it's not just pyramidal. Pyramidal is like unidirectional, one directional. Okay. The thing is, over here, it's like make it a circuit, circular ownership, so that it makes it even harder to precisely calculate what's their indirect ownership like and what's their power like, right? Hiding behind this complicatedness, right? That's the purpose of it. And in terms of taxing it, right, depending on the indirect ownership, right, it's even harder. Okay. Cross holdings among Samsung Group companies. This diagram, Lee family holds Samsung Everland. That's like Disneyland kind of company. But what does Disneyland like kind of entertainment company have to do with semiconductor company? Their cash cow. Well, it holds a significant amount ownership of Samsung Life Insurance. And then Samsung Life Insurance is a significant owner of Samsung Electronics, the cash cow of this group. And then they also have ownership of Samsung SDS, which is about the big data company. And then the thing is, Samsung Electronics own Samsung Card, which in turn owns 5% of Samsung Everland. Holy cow. Okay. So there's a circular relation going on at one level, and then another circular in ownership going on in the Samsung Everland to Life to Card, another level. And then another circular ownership, thank you, going through Samsung C&T Construction Company, 1.5%, right? And then it's like a circuit, but like a semiconductor circuit. You see this kind of, these guys' expertise is semiconductor, keep on doing what you're good at and applying it creatively. Lee family, they own Samsung SDS directly. And then, C&T also owns it. and it's circular going everywhere. But this is just a part of their group ownership structure, one part. As it turns out, this is, rather bigger picture. What you see on your right hand side is the ownership structure of this Samsung Group, where is Samsung Electronics. Let's see. Samsung Electronics, where are you? Samsung Life Insurance, Fire and Marine, and then, yeah, all these kind of things. I can't even find where the heck they are, right? Electromechanics, that's Samsung Jeonggi, that's Samsung Electro. Oh yeah, here's Samsung Electronics. And then it is just separately, showing it in like this one, right? And then it looks quite similar to semiconductor circuits. Can you figure that out, right? Well, finding out the precise voting rights is a terribly difficult job, right? Genius to devise this kind of things. 비서실 or secretary, like a lot of guys had to think about, a creative way of, hiding their ownerships like this. Part of the reason has to do with their tax evasion, by the way, right? To make it more complicated for the tax agents to find out where to tax them, right? That's where they, keep a lot of money, okay, within their corporations. And then within their corporations, under whose name? The owner family's name, they keep it, right? And then with that, what do? They purchased a lot of art pieces of the world. You see Picasso's here? Yes. As it turns out, this year, like this month, right? They announced that they will donate 23,000 pieces of art pieces, right? You see Monet, right? Over there, to donate this to a national museum. Okay, why? Because their owner family is in trouble, in jail, and they seem to have to. It seems like they have to pay a lot of taxes to the government. So it's a kind of I guess it's a way of payment in kind. If you think Samsung is the only one, wake up, because the leader does it and the follower follows it. Lotte is a group over there, and then they also have, they don't belong to semiconductor industry, but they learned it so that their ownership structure, Lotte Hotel, and then Lotte Chilsung, and then Lotteria, whatever company that is, semiconductor structure. All right, good luck figuring out the ownership structure. Why is that the case? The legal protection, is poor. That can be one reason. But another reason I find is that the purpose of tax evasion. Okay, let's be honest. Right? A lot of the problem with these leaders is that they have their secretary groups inside their family, and then always these secretary groups ruin the founding family, and then flattering and say, oh, you know what, here's a way to save your taxes. I'm your private banker, and I'm gonna let you save your taxes. You don't have to pay tax if you do this and that, and then make your ownership structure like complicated, like semiconductor, like that. And by that, they win the favor of the founding family. Oh, I love you. And then they become number one, number two guys, right? And then they publish books. Anyway, so I don't like that kind of structure, by the way, personally. Always, as a leader, you have to be careful about your secretary groups, 가신 group, right? So that's the trouble point over there. And then that kind of complicated ownership structure, what is it bad about? Well, first of all, tax evasion is bad for the whole country. And second, right, by constructing this kind of complicated structure, many times they ruin the shareholder value of the small shareholders like you and me, right? Samsung Construction, right? Samsung 물산 and 제일모직, and like 4 years ago or 3 years ago, that is a notorious case, right? They pay to take over this Samsung construction cheaply, right? They mislead these investors, and then let them lure them to vote yes in various ways. Very shameful one. That happens many times. But the atomistic shareholders like you and me, we don't know how to sue them. Okay, we don't have the resources to sue them. The lawyers, they don't work for us. They work for the founding families. Kim and Jang, good luck, right? So that is the reality, okay? And that is the reason why we have Korea discount in stock market, okay? Why is the Korean corporations stock priced lower than their true value? Because there's a chance of expropriation from this founding family like that. We just don't realize because we are brainwashed by the media, okay? Anyway, the media has a bias. They have every reason to flatter the founding family because they are the advertisers. They pay you. We don't pay them, the media, right? That's why. Anyway, the debt is another side of corporate governance. If managers fail to pay interest and principal to creditors, the company can be forced into bankruptcy and managers may lose their jobs. Borrowing can have a major disciplinary effect on managers, motivating them to curb private benefits and wasteful investments and trim bloated organizations. And however, excessive debt creates its own agency problems. Risk shifting, we said it. Overseas stock listing. Yeah. I mean, before we move on over here, risk shifting can be a serious problem because, okay, that of the limited liability property, limited liability, okay? Shareholders, they don't take infinite or unlimited liabilities for the borrowed money, okay? Shareholders, if the company goes bankrupt, the shareholders lose 100% of their ownership, 100% of their money, but not more than 100%. That's what limited liability is about, right? So if you look at the balance sheet, asset and liabilities and equities, right? Then sometimes your equity value is so small and then liabilities is so huge, like 10 times your equity. What do? You take the liabilities, you need to pay a fixed amount of interest only, fixed, right? Interest. Then what would you do? Get billions of dollars in debt, and then you may try to do your business and invest in your true business project and work hard, okay? That's a good case scenario, okay, as an equity holders. The thing is that many times, because of the limited liabilities, these equity holders, what do? Borrow $1 billion from the bank and then run to Bitcoin market or Dogecoin and look for chances, taking a risky business, or go to casino, roulette, right? Literally, they bring the money to casino or this kind of cryptocurrency market, hoping and praying that they will get 10 times the return. That if 10 times return happens, then your asset value will go up by 10 times, right? But remember, you have only limited liability. You just have to pay the principal, and then the remaining part of the jackpot becomes your equity. And you're rich. You'll be happy to hit the jackpot with the borrowed money, other people's money. But what if it fails? 90% or more, you will lose money with this borrowed money, right? If you go to the cryptocurrency market. If you lose money, then wipe off, all liabilities. You say screw up, the trouble is yours, bankers. I can't pay you anything. And then, my 100% of investment also goes down, right? Zeros, say bye-bye. Then the bankers are screwed totally, right? That's something called risk shifting. Risk shifting. Moral hazard. Very serious problem. Okay? I bet you these days there must be a lot of risk shifting going on because of that cryptocurrency market. I don't like it, the situation. Anyway, overseas stock listing is one way of enhancing your corporate governance, because assuming that your overseas investors want better governance, right? They have better monitoring capability, and they may be more vocal. They may be less conformative, right? Japan especially, much more conformative than America. So by listing in the US market, you get exposed to more vocal, non-conformative investors, and that can bother you if you do badly in your business, right? So corporate governance, it makes you work harder, makes the CEO work harder. That's the idea over here. Market for control, corporate control is like when you badly perform, okay? Not only you get fired as a CEO, but also the corporate control matters, so that your company will be taken over by other company, right? That's the idea here. Badly managed companies, your stock price will shrink down naturally, cheaper than your true asset value, okay? Because you lazily did not work hard. Then cheap price, what can they do? Outside companies, they can buy you up and kick you out, right? That's it. All right, corporate governance reform happens every now and then. Ubiquitous. We are the world, right? Everywhere in the world, we see a lot of mavericks, and then accounting fraud, and then this kind of badly managed companies get detected, and then we punish them, and afterwards we try to improve our governance system to prevent any future troubles, right? One a prominent case or prominent or notorious case was about Enron in 2001, a huge debacle in US history in capital market. But the size of the fraud was nothing to compared with Daewoo in Korea. 1 billion or something in 2 billions or something in the Enron. But Daewoo in Korea is like 4 billion or something like that, 3 to 4 times bigger magnitude. The difference is that the United States, they punish once and for all, like brutally. The rule of law is there, okay? Once you break the law, and 일벌백계 is like punish them like to the end, to their lifetime, right? Many decades of imprisonment, right, for the guys who got involved in the fraud. But in Korea, right, the rule of law is very weak. 주치감경 is like if you are, if you made a mistake simply because you were drunk, or could not resist the temptation somehow. What? Then the judges, say, oh, poor you, you don't have to get punished like 10 years, only 3 years, right? 3 to 4 years. That's the rule of law in Korea. That's the reason why Korea discount is there. But that's what's been going on. Anyway, so corporate governance reform took place in the United States in response to the Enron scandal. That's what we are trying to say. The US system tried to bring some more accounting transparency. You have to disclose a lot more, and bring everything on your balance sheet, please, right? Instead of hiding off balance sheet, right? All your special purpose vehicle kind of things, they don't buy it, right? Bring it on balance sheet so that we can see it. Right, scandal-weary investors around the world are demanding corporate governance reform, and it's not just the company's internal governance mechanisms that failed. Auditors, regulators, banks, and institutional investors also failed in their respective roles. Failure to reform corporate governance will damage investor confidence, stunt the development of capital markets, and rise the cost of capital. Difficult to borrow and difficult to issue stocks, right? And distort capital allocation, and even shake confidence in the capitalist system itself, right? So that's why. Sarbanes-Oxley Act was established after Enron debacle, and then the major effort of accounting regulation, and you need to have audit committee in your board of directors, and then they have to be independent of the CEOs. and things like that. They enforced it. Internal control assessment and then executive responsibility. Now you have to, both CEO and CFO have to certify signature on their 10K or accounting reports in the US every year, saying that, you know, this is clear, and then we built it to the standard of GAAP, right? And things like that. Many companies find compliance burdensome, costing millions of dollars. Some foreign firms have chosen to list their shares in London stock exchanges instead of US exchange to avoid costly compliance. It's like a hide and seek going on. You bring more stringent ruling of accounting disclosures in the US, they move to other international markets, right? So it is much better if there is an international cooperation, right? In a coordinated manner, they should bring up the standard together. Otherwise, you will see this kind of hide and seek tendencies, right? In the Institute, ethical and professional standards of corporate governance, right? The board, right? The CFA Institute, right? They have a set of standards about this kind of board of the governance standards where you have to look at, and this belongs to the CFA exams, the ethics part, I guess, right? You need to pay attention to these kind of issues. The board, is it largely independent of the influence of the CEOs? What if the independent directors gets paid by the CEO personally or treated in a golf party or something like that, right? Are the directors qualified enough, right? Do they have like a CFA kind of things, or, you know, more financial expertise, like business degrees in finance? Did they learn finance from Andy Kim, right? This kind of things. Kidding. Anyway, so do they have access to outside resources? How are they elected, right? Is it a fair election going on? Or is it just a dictatorship by the founding families, right? Do any directors have cross-company relationship, like 일감 몰아주기, like tossing all this workload to, you know, unfair deals, internal transactions happen among these directors? You have to pay attention. And the management, right? Are they vendors or customers, or do they have a code of ethics? Are there lots of perks like Bentleys and then or Rolls Royce or Ferrari? Do they, you know, do CEOs, right, get this kind of perks, or private jets, right? Unnecessary private jets, you know, like RJR Nabisco. How is their compensation structured, right? Do they have enough of, you know, performance sensitive compensation, stock ownership and stock options, right? That's performance sensitive, so that's healthy, right? Makes you work harder, right? In this kind of setting. So you have to make sure about that. It's not about the absolute amount of money they get, right? So you have to be careful. Cadbury Code of Best Practices. Well, that's an ethical standard without the force of law. However, the London Stock Exchange requires listed firms to either comply or explain why they cannot. About 90% of the LSE, London Stock Exchange listed companies, comply with the code. And then requires the board of the directors of firms to meet regularly and then retain full and effective control over the company, monitor executive management, and the code says that there should be a clearly accepted division of responsibilities at the head of a company such that no one person has unfettered power. The board should include non-executive directors in sufficient number for their views of to carry a weight. And then afterwards, right, the United States, after Sarbanes-Oxley, things seemed going well. But with 2008 and 9 global financial crisis, they experienced another kind of troubles, and then the DoddFrank Act got established to secure the governance of make the governance of the banking system healthy. Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act passed in reaction to the financial crisis. Volcker rule was there, right? Deposit-taking banks will be banned from proprietary trading and from owning more than a small fraction of hedge funds and private equity firms. Why? Because these banks, right, depository institutions like Bank of America or Citigroup, they seem to have accumulated a lot of positions in the extremely risky derivatives transactions, derivatives investments like CDOs, CDO squared, or credit derivatives, all these kind of things. And then that, investing those money with their own money, called a proprietary account, right? Prop trading desk. That's bank's own capital. What's wrong with doing bad things or good things or risky things with my own money? That's my money. It's not other people's money. But wait a minute. The banking is about having enough of buffer capital. I told you about Camel's analysis, right? The buffer capital in times of trouble, right? You should be able to bring back the money to the depositors, right? What if your asset value is smaller than your liabilities, the deposit amount, right? There, your capital, right? Your own money should be sacrificed, right? But if you screwed up your own money with prop trading desk, you will be in deeper trouble. So that's why they restricted this prop trading desk, right? And then resolution authority is there. The government can seize and dismantle a large bank if the bank faces impending failure. And then the derivatives, OTC derivatives trading will move to electronic exchanges with contracts settled through a clearinghouse. And then the systematic risk regulation has been there ever since the DoddFrank Act. Systematically important firms will be identified and their financial condition will be monitored. Money center bank kind of guys, right? The big guys in banking industry, that, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America kind of guys, right? They are systematically important firms. They have to be under more supervision. And consumer protection. A new independent consumer financial protection bureau will be set up to monitor mortgages and other loan products. So nowadays, banks, right, are under heavy regulatory supervision to make sure each and every product they sell, each and every financial products they sell to their clients is safe enough, right? You don't want to mess around with other people's money, right? That's what this consumer protection right is about, right? Intensive regulatory pressure is there. So that's why in terms of fintech, there has been a lot of development called RegTech, regulation technology. You have to report, you have to write a lot of amount of so many pages of report to the regulators very frequently. So let the machine write it. Because your job will be, the banking job will be, just dull, right? Many of you try to go to the banking business, commercial banking or KDB, Keximbank, or, 금융공기업. The thing is, their jobs are so dull, right? Extremely smart guys will get the chance because the competition rate is extremely high, 1 out of 100. But those guys who get that job are creative guys and then smart brains. So that's why they pass that exam. The trouble is that their job is so dull, nothing they can do about it. Okay, they prevent you from doing risky jobs. No fun job. The only good thing about this job is that you have iron rice bowl or like a 철밥통 until you get 60 years old. Hell job, come on. It's ruining your whole human capital, but it makes your parents feel happy instantaneously right now, but not in the long run, okay? You will be responsible for your life, not your parents. But students don't think about this. Immediate happiness is the only thing they care about, especially for their parents, right? That's why they run for this kind of jobs. The thing is, the commercial banks and then this kind of Kexim Bank or KDB Bank, right? No fun. They don't allow you to do any kind of fun jobs. And even for Bank of America, kind of commercial banks in the outside, right? In the foreign banks, you cannot do any fun jobs over there, right? Good luck. Good luck. The thing is, I want to draw your attention to the letter to the shareholders written by Jamie Dimon. 60 pages long this year. 60 pages long plus, right? Why did they write it? Why did he write that much of a long letter to the shareholders? Typically, Warren Buffett writes letter to shareholders in Berkshire Hathaway for about 14 pages long or 15, right? Why 60 pages for Jamie Dimon? The bank, JP Morgan Chase, right? He was complaining in that their competition is unfair, okay? We are competing against big tech firms, the fintech companies or tech fin companies, call it, whichever way you want to call it, right? Those Amazon, right? Or Tencent or Kakao Bank kind of guys. They are not under this systematic regulation or consumer protection rights. Whatever fintech, in the holy name of fintech, whatever product they produce, they can just sell it and then attract customers from, and then snatch the customers away from the traditional commercial banks, right? And then, so that's a very unfair situation. They complain. The thing is, these fintech companies, to the extent these fintech companies join the capital market and compete with these conventional banks, they should be under same regulatory regime like this. That's his claim. And I think that makes sense as well, right? The banks, why do they have this kind of a huge restrictions? Cannot do anything about it, right? Because there's a reason why. If you don't without this regulation, they were going crazy and then creating a lot of troubles, right? The next generation future financial crisis, where would it come from? I bet you it's going to be from fintech. Okay, techfin or fintech, whatever it may be. Cryptocurrencies, all these kind of things will be the next trouble point. Okay, it's forthcoming to you. We just don't know how it will unfold, right? In the summer break, SKKU students, you will have some summer challenge projects. You can write some papers about it in your own way, right? What's going to be the future of a future financial crisis in Korea? What's the scenario, right? This kind of things, right? Really, really matters. And the summary of this chapter, it's self-evident, so go ahead and read it. And I hope you liked my lecture until this point right now. And it was my pleasure, always my pleasure to do this, international finance class. I enjoyed teaching you guys. And then I hope you stay in touch with me, right? And whenever you have some questions, especially for your careers, right? Every point of your career, you can just come back to me, even after graduating, right? Some exchange students in the past, keep in touch with me through Instagram or Facebook. And then, he says, every now and then, I got a job over here, and then start to work in this and that, and then keep me posted. And, I like it, right? And then sometimes if I can give some advice, I can, right? To the best of my knowledge. It's not a perfect one. You have better information, right? But based on my experience and what I see around, right? I can give you some ideas, how to strategically, do some job interviews with your potential employers, right? Things like that. I can help you if I could, right? So I'm here for you. Email me, and then I'll be, talking to you. Welcome. And then, so I hope you like it. And then stay in touch, right? It's all about networking. And then your teammates and then your classmates, even though it is pandemic situation, you cannot meet each other. That should not prevent you from meeting in a small scale, right? 4 guys and girls and, 4 people meeting anywhere. It's okay, legally okay. So go ahead and meet. It just depends on your intention and passion and creativity, right? So after final exams, you can just celebrate yourself. Maybe you can post it on your Instagram and say, cheers, international finance, and then SKKU, GBA, and then Andy Kim, or Dr. Finance, right? Celebrating. And I'll be happy to see that in your Instagram like that. So hope you like it, and then see you later. Bye-bye.